Hello everyone and welcome to this important and very interesting session coming up on global perspectives on energy management systems. My name is Patrick Crittenden from the Sustainable Business Group. Welcome back, and just remember before we start this session, if you can't stay through the whole session, you will be able to watch all of the streams at any time following the conference up to December. So if you don't want to miss out and you have to jump between sessions, you can always come back and watch this session. And thanks very much to our sponsor, Flow Power, really important role they're playing in supporting this session. And we're going to hear from Nathaniel Galindo from Flow Power as one of the speakers today. I'd encourage you throughout this session to put some questions in the Q&A section of the platform. We probably won't be able to answer all of those questions, but it will provide us an opportunity to have some discussion with our panelists. And also, as a follow-up to the session, I will make sure that I pass some of those questions on to the speakers and get some responses that we can share with you later on. Now, we're focused in this session on two critical aspects of energy efficiency: industry and energy management. Now, industry accounts for roughly a third of energy consumed in Australia, and around the world it's roughly a third, depends from country to country. But we know that from an energy efficiency perspective, it can be really challenging, because on one end of the spectrum in industry, we have very large energy consumers in pulp and paper and cement, for example, where energy is a high proportion of operating costs and expertise may be readily available, but many of those organisations are dealing with older technology that can't be changed overnight, requiring significant capital investment and market certainty. At the other end of the spectrum, we have many small and medium-sized organisations, and they typically face other challenges. Energy can make up a smaller proportion of energy costs. They may lack awareness of the benefits, expertise, and they may lack capital. Now, what we do know is that large or small energy management systems can play a role in helping any organisation to improve their energy efficiency performance and to obtain a whole range of other benefits. So when we're talking about energy management systems, we're talking about having a structured approach to driving improvements, whether that's using the international standard ISO 50001, or whether it's a smaller management system that may be made up of just energy audits or training or other components such as use of energy data and so on. Now, we know that take-up in Australia has been fairly uneven. We certainly have some great performers, but we have other organisations where there's great benefits and opportunities if they can improve the way in which they manage energy on a day-to-day basis. But how do we implement that? As policymakers, what kinds of policies are likely to work best? As energy service providers, how can we promote the uptake of energy management systems? As personnel within large energy consumers, what are the actions we can take to drive improvement? Well, in this session, we're going to get some insights into the implementation of energy management systems. And we're going to get those insights from around the world. Our first speaker is going to be Julianne Brensel, who's a specialist in energy management systems from TÜV SÜD in Germany. So we'll hear a German perspective on the way in which that has been approached and uptake has been made by industry. Now, that's a pre-recorded interview, and thanks to Rob Murray-Leach for undertaking that interview. You can see Julianne and all the other speaker profiles on the platform. Julianne will be followed by Ethan Rogers, who will give us some insight into the United States Department of Energy programs for energy management systems. Nathaniel Galindo from Flow Power will really pick up on a very important area that's very timely at the moment, is about the price signal for energy efficiency. And we'll delve into a bit of detail there and as an underpinning for energy management systems. And finally, we've got the great opportunity to hear from Dr. Satish Kumar, who's going to give us some insights from India on the Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme. So hold on, have a listen to the presentations. We'll do the pre-recorded interviews first, and then we'll move into the 2 live speakers that we have. And following that, we'll pick up on your questions in a panel discussion. And we'll be going until around 5 o'clock this afternoon. So let me hand over here to the pre-recorded interview. Thanks to Rob Murray-Leach for his interview with Julianne Brensel from Energy Management Systems, TÜV SÜD in Germany.
We're really delighted today. We've got Julianne Brensel here from TÜV SÜD in Germany. She's an expert in energy management, has been working in the field for over a decade in Germany, came highly recommended from Germany's energy efficiency organization as one of the top experts in the country in energy management. And in fact, has just released a major new book on that.
Well, actually, to put it that way, my book, I'm one of 4 authors of this book, which is called Energy Management. The book mainly is about the global standard ISO 50001. So it describes what are the main contents and how to put it right in the practical life. It talks about energy markets, and it deals with energy data management systems, which are also a major part of energy management. And my contribution to this book is the economic assessment. So I wrote a small chapter about different methods of assessing energy saving measures. Mm-hmm. There are, I guess you are a little bit familiar with something like payback periods and net present value and internal rate of return. And yeah, I'm discussing all these methods and the advantages and disadvantages in practical energy management daily life.
Your expertise is in the financials of energy management. What are the main reasons you find from your practical experience about why companies should spend time and money to manage their energy better? Because obviously there are costs in energy management. You do need to have dedicated staff and time and cost towards good qualities of energy management.
Yeah, that's exactly the main reason, because I would recommend energy management systems. Companies can save a lot of money if they are aware of the possibilities of energy saving. And in fact, I think they are often not aware of that these are recurring savings. It's not just once a year, so you carry out an energy saving measure and ready, and the saving is then coming just every year. So you're cutting your energy costs in long term. And another good reason, especially for an energy management system, according to the ISO 50001 standard, is that you are investigating many saving possibilities that don't cost anything. So you really dig into this company and get a thorough view onto the machinery and the temperatures and pressures and everything the people need in order to run their machinery. And these small changes, like reducing temperatures a little bit or reducing pressure about 1 bar, and these are actually not very cost intensive, but they come out as an energy saving in the end as well. So this is another good reason. If you look at the global perspective, at least this is what we are doing in Germany. We are having loads of studies about how to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2050, 60, 100, whatever. And all of these serious studies say we can achieve 100% renewable energy, but we need to cut our energy demand by about 50% in order to achieve these 100%. And this is why it is extremely important that everybody, every person, every entity do their bit in order to achieve these long-term goals.
So how popular are various energy management systems in Germany? Because we have heard that Germany, if you look at the figures, is one of the highest take-up of ISO 50001 in the world.
Actually, it has, I looked it up. In 2019, we've had 5,786 certificates in Germany, which is a share of 30% of the overall certificates issued globally, which are 18,000 and something. So it's we in Germany do have 30% of the global certificate number. Within Germany, I looked it up, we have about 650,000 companies in the manufacturing industry, yes. There are about 3 or 4 million companies in Germany. But if you only look at the manufacturing industry, 650,000 companies, 5,700 certificates, it is about 1%. 1% of our producing companies do have an energy management system which is certified.
Is ISO 50001 the dominant energy management system in Germany? Because I understand there's a few systems that are used by bigger and smaller companies.
The ISO 50001 standard is not the main standard we are using in Germany. So it's about 5,700 certificates according to the ISO 50001. And we do have at least 2 more energy management systems in Germany. One is the so-called energy audit, according to the European norm, European standard 16,247. And the other one is a so-called alternative system, according to a certain decree. It is called a decree concerning energy efficiency systems. It is linked to a second tax break, actually. And I've come up with a little piece of paper this morning. I thought, how can I describe the 3 different systems, ISO 50001 and the other 2? So I just pictured it like this. The so-called alternative system is a very small system. It's mainly about how much energy are we consuming in the company, which are the main consumers, and which are the main saving possibilities ready. This is the so-called alternative system. Then we have the so-called energy audit. According to the EN 16,247, the energy audit is very similar to the alternative system, but it contains some more requirements regarding, for example, the qualification of the energy auditor and stuff like that. And then we have the energy management system according to the ISO 50001 standard, which is a very big system. It contains all the elements of the alternative system, and then we put on top many more processes, for example, energy purchasing and so on. I won't go into detail, but just so you have an idea, we have a very, very small system, a little bigger system, and the ISO 50001. And talking about the popularity, the energy audits, according to 16,247, it is estimated that about 100,000 companies in Germany are obliged to implement it. They are not obliged if they do already have an ISO 50001 certificate, but if not, they have to implement this energy audit. And this alternative system, it is linked to a tax break, and it is estimated that about 22,000 companies in Germany carry out this so-called alternative system. It's difficult to get correct figures, but this is just so you get an idea. Alternative systems are the more popular in Germany because of certain governmental obligations.
So to give you a bit of a sense of scale, you've got about 5,000 with the ISO 50001, about 20,000 with the alternative system, and about 100,000 with the energy audit, which is a European energy management system.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly an energy management system. We call it energy efficiency system because it's not working like a circle. Energy management system is working in this PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act circle, and you are running it throughout the year, and an energy audit can be carried out once and ready. And then in Germany, the companies are obliged to carry it out every 4 years.
You've got these 3 systems in Germany. What are the main drivers that lead companies to adopt these systems? So you mentioned tax breaks as a key driver. How do those work, and are there other drivers for the take-up of these systems?
Companies have to have an energy management system in order to get tax reductions, tax breaks. They can carry out the ISO 50001 standard or an environmental management system. This is also possible. The other reason for this high take-up of energy management is the legal obligation. So companies have to carry out an energy audit unless they have the ISO 50001 certificate. These are the main reasons. The tax break topic, it has been carried out in Germany since 2013. So people who want, or the tax breaks had been there before 2013, and then the government started to say, if you want to benefit from the tax breaks from now on, you have to comply with the ISO 50001 standard. The legal obligation to carry out energy audits has been in Germany since 2015.
Julianne, it seems like your expertise is very much in how companies assess the costs and benefits of energy management approaches. And something that's come up a few times in our conversation is that you think that a payback period is a real problem and you'd rather move to other metrics. What are those metrics, and why do you think that they are better than payback period?
There are just a couple of metrics. It's, for example, the net present value, or the internal rate of return, or the annuity, or the what is it called, total costs of ownership, or life cycle costs. The main difference is that you look at the actual benefit. You look at how much money can I earn in the long term, which is the lifetime of the machinery I am investing in. It's not only how much time does it take until I get back what I've paid for, but it is looking at how much money can I actually earn with the investment I am taking. It is, well, usually management, the management looks at, or even a private person looks at, what's the interest rate? What can I get from my bank, for example? And this is just put this way of thinking into the company. If I put this money onto the bank, then I can get an interest rate of 1, 2, 3%. And if I put the money into my company, if I invest in machinery and plants, then the internal rate of return is 10%, 15%. This is a way of looking at or a metric which I would recommend because it is closer to, I think it's more logical actually. It is, to me, it is more logical to look at how much can I earn by my investment, and not how long does it take until I get it back.
So final question, what recommendations do you have for Australian state and territory governments and federal governments who want to encourage the uptake of energy management systems in Australia?
It's a good question. First of all, I think in general, the obligation or the incentive to carry out an energy audit or to implement an energy management system, I think we are on a good way in Germany. It is, I would recommend to adopt this these incentives and these obligations in other countries too. But what I see is that the systems are not working unless the companies are pushed or obliged to actually carry out or actually implement saving measures. So I would say, an obligation or an incentive to have an energy management system, but linked with a review after a year or two. Have the companies, the organizations really carried out energy saving measures? Otherwise, the energy efficiency will not really increase. And this is what we see in Germany, actually. The energy demand has not really changed since 1990. Energy demand has remained the same, more or less. Energy efficiency might have increased, but at the same time, energy demand is rising. So it's just, the rising energy demand is eating up the energy efficiency gains. And this is why we have to enforce. Well, can you say it is recommendable to force the companies to implement certain basic standards? This is what I would recommend. There are a couple of really simple things, and I would say let's oblige the companies to implement them. Maybe even give them a financial support to implement them. Another thing is in Europe, we have just a couple of directives that deal with the topic of design. And I think it is highly recommendable to have decrees and decrees mainly, which deal with building energy efficiency. So can you say it that way? So the energy efficiency of a building, so insulation and aspects like that. And also how the systems and machinery is designed. So which motor is used, for example. And we have certain directives in Europe, which the European governments have to implement, have to put into national legislation. And I think it is very important to consider this part as well. So to have houses that are well insulated and energy efficient, and to have machinery which is energy efficient. So you don't have to deal with the human factor, with the staff which is not interested. Yeah, so design is a big topic in my opinion. In the third place, I would say the government should try and encourage this paradigm change, which I mentioned earlier. So encourage long-term thinking and not thinking in payback periods. Globally, there are there's much happening right now. We see many companies who implement zero CO2 emissions strategies, and they also ask all the other companies who are delivering to have zero emission products. This is on the one hand, zero emission strategies are just popping up like mushrooms. And the other thing is that it is discussed, the European government is discussing right now a European carbon border tax, so that only low carbon products can be imported, and the high carbon products you have to pay more if you want to import them or whatever. This is just right now the discussion they are dealing with in Brussels. It is supposed to be decided in 2023, something like that. But it is a global trend. The global trend is to reduce carbon emissions, and this will lead to energy efficiency improvements. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Julianne, and thanks to Rob for conducting that interview there as well. As I mentioned, you can still put your questions up on the platform, and we can follow up with Julianne directly. Just to pick up on a couple of important points there were many. I think it's very interesting to see the nested system. So having the 3 different levels, the alternative system, the energy audit or the energy efficiency system, and the energy management system to ISO 50001. So giving both small and large firms options around that as they improve and increase their sophistication and capacity. The importance of incentives in the case of Germany, the tax incentive, the importance of using the right metrics and talking the language of decision makers in terms of net present value, IRR, total cost of ownership, etc. And the increasing trends, of course, around net zero targets and border taxes, perhaps in Europe. In our case, our 5 largest trading partners all have net zero targets. So these are things for us all to watch out for, and we are seeing great leadership from industry where they do see some of these drivers in terms of export and so on. Energy management systems, such an important part of this. Another perspective we're about to hear from comes from Ethan Rogers from the US Department of Energy. He's in the Advanced Manufacturing Office, and he's also had extensive experience, spent a lot of time at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy working on industry, energy policy, and energy management systems. This is another pre-recorded interview. I've asked a few questions at the end, but again, if you do have some questions, send them through and we can follow up with Ethan later on. Okay, thank you. Over to Ethan Rogers.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak about our 50001 Ready program. It's been in place for about 3 years now, and it has really kind of changed how we've been approaching energy management. I'm sure most yourselves and most of the people in the audience are familiar with the ISO 50001 Energy Management Standard. It was created some time ago, and it is kind of the default way to set up an energy management program or at a facility, right? But a lot of organizations, especially here in the United States, find that a bit overwhelming because of the third-party certification, the fact that there's not a lot of flexibility to it. I mean, there's certain things you have to do, right? And not all facilities have to do everything in the ISO standard to achieve the results that they want. And so, DOE has been creating tools and providing technical assistance to the industrial space. I work in the advanced manufacturing office, so we're focused on the manufacturing space. We also have the building technology space, which focuses, as you might imagine, on buildings. We have our federal energy management program that focuses on federal facilities, et cetera, right? We're a big organization. We focus on a lot of aspects of energy and energy efficiency. And so not everybody needs the full-fledged ISO standard. And we certainly have been encouraging people to pursue that. We've been very involved in the ISO technical committee and pushing that forward. But we decided a few years ago that we wanted to kind of bookend the ISO standard with an on-ramp, which we call the 50001 Ready program. The title kind of indicates when you finish it, you are kind of ready to pursue certification if you want, right? And then we also have our Superior Energy Performance Program, which is third-party certification, verification of your energy savings. And so what I like to say, and maybe a good way to understand the distinction here, is that the ISO 50001 certification of your energy management system means people can trust that you have a robust energy management system. If you go the additional step to get certification to the SCP 50001, it means you can trust your energy savings numbers. It's a robust top-down regression analysis, bottom-up check protocol for doing calculating your energy savings. But what I really wanted to talk to everybody about today was the Ready program, because this has been very, very popular. It's useful, not just to manufacturers, but we're seeing people, commercial buildings, institutions, federal buildings, across the gamut, use this. And it's a 3-step process. The first step is you use the tool, you complete, there's 25 different steps that we've broken the ISO 50001 standard down to. And after you're done, you self-declare that. You send us a regression analysis, and then we recognize you as being 50001 ready. And I mentioned that there are 25 steps within the Navigator. And the Navigator, I should mention, is an online platform. And it's available on our website. I'll have the URL at the end of my slide deck here. But anybody in the world can access this. You can set up an account and start working your way through these steps. And what we did is the ISO standard itself doesn't tell you how to set up an energy management system. It tells you what an energy management system should have in it. And so we took that high-level structure that is within the 50001 standard, as well as the other management standards that ISO's created, and created dials on the dashboard, and then broke those down, and you can see the list here on this slide, and then broke that down into a total of 25 tasks. And so simple things like start an energy team, check. Come up with a policy, check. Get leadership commitment, check, right? So all these different things that make it fairly step by step to implement an energy management system. Built into the Navigator are a whole host of online tools, and we've consolidated many of them into a playbook. And there's 25 pages on the playbook, or I should say 25 pieces to it, aligning with those 25 steps. And so you can see here that if you want to go kind of 20th century, you can print them off, put them in a binder. When I first learned about ISO 9000, that's what everybody had. They had a binder, right? They put everything in a binder. Now it's a dedicated file on the hard drive or the server, right? Anyway, so you could put this together. And I should mention that these are Word documents. They're not PDFs. So you can play with them. You can tailor them. We wanted to create the maximum flexibility. And then there's all kinds of other resources that we have built into here. The first iteration we did of the Navigator, we had 129 resources, which some people told us was a bit overwhelming. So we've consolidated what we thought were the most useful and important ones into the 25 that now make up the playbook. But the old ones are still there. So for folks that created their accounts and use the old ones, they can still have access to it. Another feature we've built into the Navigator is to not just do one site, but to be able to do multi-sites. And so you can create a central office function. And that central office function can monitor the activity of other sites. And we found this to be very popular with corporations that have manufacturing facilities around the country, or commercial facilities that have lots of different properties, or government agencies that have, obviously lots of different campuses and things like this. And so some of that activity, some of those 25 steps can be done in the central office. And you can assign those. You can use the Navigator to assign those to like the central office. But you can also assign things to other people, to different energy teams at the different sites. And you can communicate amongst each other with these different facilities. Here's the dashboard for the multi-site. And so people at the central office could go to here and see how the different facilities are proceeding along on their 25 steps. And if somebody was doing well, you'd send them a message. If you had a question about how they're doing on something, again, you can communicate with them. So we wanted to create that flexibility for folks to use it. And we're even seeing some energy service companies and utilities use this feature. I'm going to get to the details of that here in a bit. But before I do, I wanted to mention that also associated with the Navigator are a series of different tools. We have an energy footprint tool that measures, you can use to track your consumption. We have project lists. We have a regression analysis, that's the ENPI Lite tool, and the ENPI tool, which is Excel-based. The ENPI Lite is an online tool. And they can use these to supplement the kind of the plan, do, check, act nature of an energy management system. Here's a bit of information about the the energy footprint tool. Obviously, lots of different spreadsheets you can fill out to track your consumption. I suspect many organizations and programs already have similar types of spreadsheet tools like this. Here's the MPI Lite tool that allows you to do a regression analysis. You can also use this to calculate carbon associated with your energy. And then this is a energy performance improvement action spreadsheet where you can record the different projects that you're doing and record the savings. And this is useful for your bottom-up analysis or summary of savings as well. And so these are all available through our website. And I want to give you an example of a company that has been using the Navigator on its own to implement their energy management program. Whirlpool, I suspect many of you are familiar with this manufacturer of appliances like refrigerators and dishwashers and whatnot. They have a manufacturing plant in Nana, Iowa that makes refrigerators, and they've been using the Navigator to guide their implementation. And as you can see, just doing like no cost, low cost, best practices types of stuff, they've been able to reduce their energy consumption by 15% and energy bill by $450,000. So it can be a very useful tool at the facility level as well as at the organizational level, because Whirlpool is going to use this with the rest of their plants too. I also wanted to talk about how we're engaging utility sector programs and other like energy service companies and statewide efficiency utilities, is that they can use that feature, kind of enhanced version of that feature, that multi-site feature, to see how a cohort is doing. So you might have a utility set up a program and use the Navigator as a structure for engaging companies in implementing their energy management systems. And this is the software behind the Navigator is open source, and so it's easy to fuss with and tailor and the like. And so what they'll do, and we work with them, we'll do a memorandum of understanding with, let's say, Energy Trust of Oregon is one of our program partners, which is a statewide efficiency utility in the state of Oregon. Focus on Energy Wisconsin is a statewide utility, efficiency utility in the state of Wisconsin. And so we've partnered with them, and they've created their tailored version of the Navigator. So it's a different URL that their customers would go to and create their own accounts. And then the program administrator can see how they're doing and can send them information about that program, such as incentives, about rebates and things like that. It gives an additional level of flexibility for the program. And of course, you put the logo all over it and the like. And we're working with public organizations like the utilities I mentioned. We're working with private implementers. Some energy service companies have been doing it. And so it's proved to be a fairly flexible tool. And again, we tend to be built around the cohort approach, where you would have energy teams from multiple facilities. Those facilities could be from the same company spread across a large geographic area, or it could be a mixture of companies. What we tend to see is people coming together in a non-competitive space, right? We've got some cohorts that are nothing but wastewater treatment facilities. We've got other cohorts that are all federal facilities, and some that are a mixture of different types of manufacturing. So that shared learning, the opportunity for peer-to-peer interaction has been very, very helpful. So some additional graphics on what we have offered our program partners. They get use of our 50,001 Ready logo. We can add their logo to it. We can create, when we recognize a facility, we send them out this nice little piece of paper that says that they're recognized, and we could certainly add in the logo of the company, the sponsoring program. And so, again, whether you do the multi-site through a central office, such as a corporation, or through a utility or an implementer, there's a lot of flexibility to this. I mentioned Focus on Energy Wisconsin. The way they've structured their delivery of services is that they contract with a series of third-party implementers. And one of them is Leidos, a very large company, and they have responsibility for other large customers in Wisconsin. And they have a whole portfolio of programs, one of which is a strategic energy management program. And they built that around the 50,001 Navigator. And they try to get companies to the point where they seek ISO certification to the standard. And it's really simplified stuff for them because, as I mentioned, the standard doesn't tell you how to do it, it tells you what you have to have. And so now they've got all these tools that tell them how to do it. And it's been very successful for them. I mentioned that not everybody is using every aspect of the Navigator. Some are kind of taking bits and pieces of it. And so depending on whether they want to kind of create their own one-off type of program, or they want to build entirely around the Navigator, we have that flexibility. And so some programs, they take you all the way to ISO certification. Others will just briefly mention energy management. And so, the tools, the resources that are there are things that they can leverage. And again, there's materials, there's samples, examples, and guidance on how to do that. Last thing I wanted to mention are the resources that we have that we just put out to our website are actual slide decks, not unlike the one that you're seeing today. We have dozens of slide decks that we've created, ranging from just awareness, hey, we've got this ISO 50,000 program, and it includes a 50,001 Ready program, all the way to a 2-day, 8-hour-a-day in-plant training engagement that we do. So where we have had some of our qualified instructors go to a facility like an ArcelorMittal steel plant in Cleveland, Ohio, and deliver a 2-day training on a variety of things. And one of the things that we have several different in-plant trainings that we do, like on compressed air, wastewater, and we also do on energy management. And so the slide decks for the ones on energy management are here available through the Navigator website. And it's all available. Anybody can download it, create your own program. We're trying to push as much information as we can out to the organizations that are implementing energy management systems, or the vendors that are helping companies implement energy management systems. So, and whenever we recognize a company as being 50,001 ready, we do a story on them, assuming they want us to do that. And we'll post that to our website, our Better Building Solutions Center. We'll do a press release. We usually do blogs about these things. It's not unusual to have like the Assistant Secretary or Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy Efficiency do a tweet or something about somebody that's recently been recognized as 50,001 ready. They're always asking me, what are the numbers? And you can see here that this program's 3 years old, and it really kind of came into its own in 2019. We've recognized 69 facilities as 50,001 ready to date, and there are 1,100 projects going on in the U.S. right now, which is less than half actually, of the projects that are going on internationally. As I said, anybody can use this. The U.S. Department of Energy only recognizes U.S. facilities as being 50,001 ready, but we have been working with other energy agencies in other countries to create their own 50,001 ready programs, where they can recognize organizations' facilities as being 50,001 ready. And we recently signed an MOU with the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center to create a ready program in Saudi Arabia. And we hope to do the same with Canada and Mexico in the next year or two. So it's something that's always available. Australia could certainly create its own ready program, recognize facilities in Australia using the tools that are available through our website. Our program, we're going to be doing what we call these cohorts, these online cohorts. It's been really difficult to get into plants in the year 2020, so we went online. And we've been very successful at organizing these online cohorts where, just like the in-person cohorts, except that people call in to like a monthly webinar, and then we have one-on-one coaching, like once a month. Our coaches will contact the energy teams of each facility and help them figure out what they need to do, answer any questions that they have, and help progress them towards being able to self-attest and being 50,001 ready. And in 2021, we're hoping to engage between these several different federal agencies, the Advanced Manufacturing Office, Federal Energy Management Program, Building Technology Office, and the Weatherization Program to reach over 100 facilities and truly train hundreds and hundreds of workers. So I know that's an awful lot. I felt like I spoke extremely fast, so I'm ready to welcome your questions and answer your questions you have about this program we have.
Thanks very much, Ethan. That's absolutely fantastic. And we can see that that builds on really decades of work and the way you've been able to bring it together. I mean, some of the really interesting features of what you've done, I think, as you said at the start, it's about how to, not just what you have to do. Features such as having in-plant training, promoting success. And in particular, I think it's very interesting how you've set up those cohorts, because we know that peer-to-peer learning is incredibly powerful in driving change. And then having coaches as well, your flexibility in moving and, in these COVID days to the online platforms for those meetings and webinars is really impressive. Where have you had the most success? Which industry sectors, subsectors, or types of organizations? Where have you seen the greatest uptake?
Yeah. So most of our focus has been on the manufacturing sector with facilities that are energy intensive. So when I think about the facilities that have self-attested to being 50,001 ready, we have everything from, I mentioned ArcelorMittal, a steel mill or series of steel mills, General Motors, you saw Whirlpool. We've also had some agribusinesses and food processors. There's a series of dairies up in Wisconsin, as well as food processors out in Oregon. So I think it's folks that have either an energy team in place or maybe a champion that's looking for a program to leverage. But usually energy is a variable cost of production that is important to them. Whether it's a very large part of their variable costs, or they're in a very competitive business where every penny counts. Like the food processing industry, many of those are in very competitive industries where it's a tenth of a cent per hamburger bun or something like that they make profit. So if they can trim their energy by 10%, it can make a difference.
It can link directly to profitability.
Oh yeah, drops right to the bottom line,
And what about the more challenging areas in terms of getting uptake? And what are some of your thoughts about adjustments or ways of engaging some of those other sectors or organisations that aren't currently involved?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that we're doing these online cohorts. The first step that we did this year was through our Federal Energy Management Program. And as the nature of FEMP is they don't have a whole lot of money of their own. They take resources that other agencies have and they bring them to different federal agencies like the Department of Justice, Department of Defense, and whatnot. So they're almost like a convener, right? And so they were looking for a low-cost way to help these different federal agencies address the energy use in their buildings or in their facilities, their campuses and whatnot. And that's a really tough market, government facilities, because there's all kinds of stakeholders involved. Energy is generally not the main focus of the organization. If you're the Department of Justice or NASA, energy is just not a big thing for you, right? So how do you engage people on making, courthouses energy efficient? How do NASA is used to consuming thousands and thousands of gallons of fuel to send something up into space. How are you going to get them to care about the energy efficiency of their airplane hangars or something, right? Yes. So that could be a big challenge. But there are facilities folks with every one of these federal agencies, and they have responsibility to operate their buildings properly and maintain them and reduce operating costs. And so this tool gives them a framework to engage people and drive down those costs. And I should mention, most successful energy teams include people from finance, purchasing, accounts payable, accounts receivable, that kind of thing, because there's so much energy that you can save in the purchasing decisions that you make.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Ethan. And look, I've got many more questions, and I think people listening to this have many more questions as well, because it's an amazing experience that you shared with us. Would you mind if people send in some questions, because we've pre-recorded this, would you mind if we send them to you and perhaps we can follow up with a little discussion around some of those questions?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do that. That'd be a lot of fun.
Thanks, Ethan. Much appreciated. That was a great presentation there from Ethan Rogers with some very interesting perspectives. Folks, I know it's quite difficult when we pre-record, but I think the best way to capture your questions and the follow-ups might be just to put those questions in the current question box. So you could say something like, I'd love to ask Ethan such and such, something about the ISO 50001 READY program. So if you do that, then we can capture those and we can follow up with our speakers. Now, our next two speakers will be live, so we can follow up with them directly, which is pretty handy. Our next speaker is Nathaniel Galindo. Nathaniel's a General Manager of Energy Management at Flow Power, and he's responsible for engineering services, including demand response and demand management. And Nathaniel's going to provide it's a bit of more of a niche area, but some really important insights into energy price signals and the implications for the implementation of energy management systems. Over to you, Nathaniel.
Thank you, Patrick, for that introduction, and the EEC for the opportunity to present at another exciting event, and alongside experts who have just presented some pretty fascinating material. I'm going to start from a holistic perspective in terms of what's happening across the supply mix in Australia. If we click to the next slide, please. So since 2010, there's been roughly 6 gigawatt of coal-fired power stations withdrawn from the NEM. And in that same period, there's been a huge growth in renewables with almost 30 gigawatts deployed in the last 10 years, and that doesn't include 2020 numbers. Look at that over the next 20 years, there's potentially another 15 gigawatts of coal-fired power stations that's planned to be decommissioned. And while renewables, while this will continue, renewables will grow as we start to get more aggressive about our net emissions targets across the country. So this transition is really impacting the system, the grid, and creating some of the biggest challenges in the NEM. And one of the effects that this is having is the ever recognizable duck curve and the changes this is making on the daily electricity price curve. Next slide, please. Okay, so the reason why I refer to this is because businesses and their energy management systems can potentially be doing so much more in terms of using energy more efficiently and reducing costs, but also they could or they should be supporting the grid and its adoption to more renewables. However, right now in its current form, energy management systems are not necessarily supporting our path to a clean energy future, primarily because the way the market is shielded from price signals. So next click, please. And so these price signals are essentially, your fixed peak and off-peak rates. Now, when you look at this pricing structure, there are two major impacts here. The first one is that it shelters businesses from what's happening on the grid. And so there is no signal and therefore no incentive to adjust load. And so the lows and highs will continue to be more exasperated, with peaks reaching currently $15,000 per megawatt hour and the lows reaching now negative $1,000 per megawatt hour. And so when you look at this, actually next click, please. When you look at this, the next thing or the second thing that fixed rates do is that it also shields businesses from what can be substantial savings on the basis that their energy management system can support this commercial structure and can perform a level of load and generation flexibility. And so these are two major items that energy management systems should be capable of delivering. And for this reason, next slide, please. As a large part of our market does not have a direct price signal, this is where our energy management systems are currently failing. Okay, but it's not all bad news. As pricing signals become more understood and that this energy management model is more widely adopted, forward-thinking businesses are now starting to investigate this opportunity, and will typically ask some of the following questions. When is the best time to use energy? Is it more during the mornings or in the middle of the day or towards the afternoons? How much of my energy can I reduce during a certain time, and how long can I sustain this scenario? Other questions such as, when is the best time to increase my energy use? And should I be turning off my solar PV systems during this period? These are questions that go against traditional energy management practices. And amongst all this, businesses will typically ask the question, what are the risks? And so, of course, these are all relevant questions, particularly under a time-sensitive, price-based energy management model. But of course, one question that does tend to influence customer behaviour and progresses businesses from investigation to a planning stage is typically, if we go to the next slide, please. What price signal do I need to see before I start to change my operation? And now, obviously, this price changes from business to business, and sometimes this model may not necessarily work for everyone, and they might not have a price in mind where they will be incentivized to change their operations, and that's okay. But if we look at what's happened over the last 12 to 24 months, there has been some exciting advancements in major parts of the market that can start to build exposure in demand side participation, and will start to make a price signal more relevant. And if we look at those four factors, with regulation, RERT has been underway for the last few years, but the wholesale demand response mechanism will be live in October next year. And this will provide the opportunity for businesses to dip their toes and work with services aggregators that can process these pricing signals that businesses can respond to. Through these programs, demand response and flexibility will be better understood and hopefully lead to greater adoption as businesses start to understand and control their loads according to a pricing signal. On the technology front, this has been moving at rapid speeds, where we can now virtually do anything with data and IoT and SCADA and BMS controls. But there's also been some major investments as well with storage, renewable energy systems, and on-site generation. And when you start to incorporate these elements into an energy management system and start to bring in these different energy assets, it does provide a much more dynamic and comprehensive way to approach your energy management. The tools and expertise is an area that's also been evolving, and as regulation and technology enables more dynamic demand-side participation, these tools and expertise across businesses will need to expand and likely evolve from a more singular energy manager individual to potentially a much more dynamic, interactive team, especially commanding more engagement with finance and commercial stakeholders. And of course, price signals will continue to evolve, as this will ultimately be the trigger upon which your energy management system acts upon. Now, a price signal could come from a DR aggregator, informing you to reduce your load. It could come from a retailer stating that the price has just gone up to $15,000 per megawatt hour, and to reduce your load and maximize the amount of export you have at the same time. But then the following day, that same signal could reduce down to negative $1,000. And during that period, you may want to start to ramp down your solar PV systems, both on-site and off-site, while also charging your batteries and building on any storage capacity you may have. And so these are all the different dynamics that are starting to take place in what can be, the future of this energy management system. Now, for the last 10 years, Flow Power have been providing businesses across the whole, Flow Power have been providing businesses access to the wholesale energy market in some form or another. And we can say with experience that price signals that directly correlate with the market is the most effective way to monetize your energy and save on your energy costs. Now, we know that this model is working, as other retailers are also starting to offer similar products, and we're all good with that. Because what that means is essentially the market is starting to change and is starting to better understand these benefits. And so our competitors are also doing this, and we're also having the opportunity to expand this model across a wider part of the market. Okay, so what does this mean for future energy management systems? Could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so here's an example of what an energy management system could cover. On the bottom side there, we have energy and demand management. And what I'm referring to here are your typical SCADA and BMS controls that have the ability to monitor and control your various loads. But if we move to the right, we have a multi-stakeholder system. And as we start to move towards a more time price-sensitive operation, the decision-making process under this dynamic environment can have a major impact on operations, production, revenues, and other business imperatives. So your energy management system not only needs to satisfy your technical and operational requirements, but it will need to expand so then the financial elements as well as impact on business performance and business operations can be actively monitored and managed. As we continue to go up, we have behind the meter renewables and storage, as well as front of meter generation and firming. And so both of these assets, whether it be behind or front of meter, are just as equally important to be managed under the one EMS. Understanding what you can do and cannot control in a time-sensitive operation can be critical to how you utilize these assets, and particularly how you operate these assets under your retail structure. This will be critical to ensure that you're maximizing the value of these systems. On the data front, on the bottom left there will be significant demand on aggregating different sources of data from different loads and assets, such that it can be interpreted under a very short time frame or even in a real-time format. Now, we know that these technologies are capable, many technologies out there are capable of doing this, but the challenge will be from here is really structuring the data so you can get the right piece of information to the right person at the right time. And that can be, that can obviously be challenging, particularly across a large organization. And that leads to the pricing signal. So, with the pricing signal, typically comes a commercial structure that you would usually arrange with your retailer. Now, ultimately, you would need to get this right and partner with your retailer, as this will incentivize the implementation and management of this model, but also the ongoing optimization of all these elements under the one energy management system. And so when you take all this into consideration, energy is now an integral component of how businesses operate. And every business has the responsibility to support the grid and Australia's pursuit to net emissions. And so if you can get this right, and I'll jump onto the last slide there, energy management systems will be an integral part of our clean energy future. So thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Nathaniel. Really insightful there, and summing up with really the goal of all this, energy being an integral component of how businesses operate. And we've heard the importance of digitization, the fact that data getting to the right people in the right form and in ways that they can actually make decisions about. This is really the next level of energy management. And we're going to see some great advances over the next few years. Many of us listening to this call will be involved, like yourself, in making it happen. And it's great to hear about the work you're doing to really integrate such complexity into a platform that can be used and can inform real-time decisions in practice. So thanks very much, Nathaniel.
Thanks, Patrick.
I'm going to pass on to Dr. Satish Kumar. Dr. Kumar is President and Executive Director of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy based in India. He's going to talk about a really extraordinary program called the Perform, Achieve, Trade scheme, and how it's been designed, what it's achieved, and some of the ways forward. Over to you, Dr. Kumar.
Thank you, Patrick, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. I'm going to be talking on Perform, Achieve, and Trade program as, just give me, I think, just to arrange it. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank Energy Efficiency Council of Australia and my friend Rob Murray-Leach for approaching AEEE and giving me an opportunity to speak on a remarkably ambitious, creative, and challenging energy efficiency policy that India has formulated. And it is my privilege to be part of this wonderful panel. I think my job is a little easier because Julianne spoke about energy management systems and specifically about ISO 50001. Ethan spoke about ISO 50001 Ready program and talked about how I think it is helping some US manufacturers become more energy efficient through a data-driven energy management framework. And Nathaniel spoke about the key characteristics that today's energy management system should cater to, considering the dynamic nature of today's electricity grid, and which requires flexibility, real-time pricing. And my presentation is going to talk about some of these elements and principles and how that can be deployed in a national energy efficiency program. So next slide. This slide generally talks about the way my presentation is going to run. I'm going to give a brief introduction of the PAT program. Then I'm going to talk about how the PAT program or the framework has been designed. What is the institutional structure? Because a complex program like PAT requires different entities to do their jobs. What has been the impact of the PAT scheme at a national level in terms of the energy savings or greenhouse gas emissions that has been achieved? And then what has been some learnings or observations? I will wrap up with that. So next slide. So Perform, Achieve, and Trade, or PAT in short, scheme was established as one of the initiatives under the National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency, which is one of the 8 missions under India's National Action Plan on Climate Change. It is a regulatory instrument to reduce specific energy consumption in energy-intensive industries with an associated market-based mechanism to enhance the cost effectiveness throughout the country through certification of excess energy savings, which can then be traded. It requires every plant as applicable under the regulation to reduce their specific energy consumption to an agreed target over a 3-year time window. A plant that is already energy efficient has a lower target for reduction, whereas a plant that is less energy efficient is given a higher target. And that makes the program a little complicated, but I think it is also a way to justify and move the baseline to a higher energy efficiency level. The scheme allows for conversion of energy savings achieved into energy savings certificates, or ES certs for short, These certificates are issued when the designated consumers surpass their targets, and that can then be sold to another designated consumers that has failed to achieve the target through an open tradable platform. One energy saving certificate is equivalent to 1 ton of oil equivalent of energy savings. And the price of these certificate is determined in the open market through a supply and demand construct. PAT is a multi-cycle scheme, and each cycle lasts for 3 years. PAT Cycle 1 was launched in 2012 after a lot of studies and planning that was done over the previous 2 to 3 years. And then PAT Cycle 2 was notified in 2016. After the success of PAT Cycle 1, it was decided to notify that subsequent cycles are going to be on a rolling basis, and that has been the case since 2017. Alongside the rolling 2017 onward cycle, there is a deepening and widening of the PAT program that has happened, which has led to initial 8 sectors being expanded to 11 sectors currently. Also within the sectors, new industries have been identified to deepen the impact of PAT in each sector. Energy consumers who are above a certain threshold level of consumptions are designated as designated consumers, and they are required to meet the agreed upon target of reduction. There is also a provision in which energy saving certificates can be banked for the next PAT cycle to contribute towards future targets of designated consumers. Next slide. So the entire PAT framework comprises of 6 broad steps. I think it starts with an energy demand. It starts with the designated consumers getting established, which have energy consumption above a certain threshold limit. Then the baseline energy consumption is established based on the gate-to-gate specific energy consumption, followed by individual energy reduction targets that are assigned to each of the DCs. The DCs then have to submit an annual report called Performance Assessment Document, and then the monitoring and verification of claimed energy savings is conducted by accredited designated independent energy auditors, which are an important part of the PAT program. Each designated consumer is required to appoint an energy manager who is responsible for the submission of this performance assessment document. Verification of the claimed energy savings is done at the end of the compliance period. And at that time, based on the savings achieved, the energy savings certificates are issued. Then these energy saving certificates, as I spoke, can then be traded through a market mechanism specially designed for the PAT program. It is mandatory that trading of the energy saving certificates happen electronically on the designated power exchange. And there are 2 power exchange, India Energy Exchange and PXIL, which are used for trading of these certificates. Next slide. Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which has been formed through an Energy Conservation Act and formed under Ministry of Power, acts as the market regulator and administrator of the PAT scheme. So as I think this particular schematic is showing, that there are many key players, and a program or a policy like PAT, I think is not an easy policy to implement, and B is doing a pretty, I would say, an excellent job for a difficult to regulate sector, because not many countries try to regulate the industrial sector. And B has structured the PAT program wherein there are these following 5 entities have a very important role to play. So there is a technical committee which is assigned to carry out the baseline calculation and research for each sector before they are brought in under the ambit of the PAT and how threshold energy consumption levels are established. Then there is the state designated agencies and all the verification documents that are to be submitted by energy auditors, which are approved for this purpose, are routed through the state designated agencies to Bureau of Energy Efficiencies. These designated state agencies can also inspect the production process of designated consumers to ascertain the norms and standards. Then there are accredited energy auditors, and they are responsible for verification of compliance with energy consumption norms and standards for designated consumers. And as I mentioned, gate-to-gate specific energy consumption of baseline and assessment year, as per the guidelines of PAT, is enforced by these accredited energy auditors. They are also required to prepare a verification report as part of the scheme and through a template that is provided by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency to standardize the whole process. Then, of course, designated consumers. These are the units, manufacturing units in energy efficiency, energy intensive industries responsible to maintain a monitoring plan as specified by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And the designated consumers, in consultation with the accredited energy auditor, puts a monitoring and verification arrangement. And this is where whether you are an ISO 50001 entity or whether you have an energy management system in place, what kind of a metering infrastructure that you have in place starts to kick in. And sometimes many of the designated consumers start to actually plug the gaps by following best practices in the energy management system. At the end of the compliance period, designated consumers applies for the energy efficiency certificates based on the performance assessment document that is submitted to the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Once these, again, energy saving certificates are issued, they are free to trade these energy saving certificates on the approved platform. Next slide, please. So what has been the impact of the PAT program? And this particular slide lists out some of the key numbers that I am going to talk about. So the impact of PAT Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 in terms of the energy savings and emissions reductions is shown in this table. An energy reduction target of approximately 6.7 million tons of oil equivalent was set under Cycle 1. And by the end of the compliance period of 2015, this was overachieved by almost 30% and led to a savings of 8.7 million tons of oil equivalent of total energy savings. Also, 31 million tons of CO2 emissions reductions were achieved during this period, primarily due to the reduced fuel and electricity consumption. After the success of PAT Cycle 1, there was a deepening and widening exercise that was performed, which led to inclusion of 3 more sectors in addition to the previous cycle 1 and 2, and also led to 621 designated consumers as identified for PAT Cycle 2. A cumulative target of 13.63, almost doubling what was initially the target set in PAT Cycle 1 was set. And from the M&V results of approximately 535 designated consumers, 12.84 million tons of oil equivalent, so close to almost 95% of the set amount of savings has been realized. And this accounts to about 58.30 million tons of CO2 reductions. The sector-wise energy savings is shown in the associated figure. And in Cycle 1, thermal power plants have the maximum share of energy savings contribution, about 35%, followed by iron and steel, which is 24%, cement, which is 17%, and then aluminum, which is 9%. In Cycle 2, again, thermal power plants are the leading contributor with about 28% savings, followed by iron and steel of 21%. Distribution companies, which are also known as power utilities, these are 14%, and cement is about 14% as well. Next slide. And then I am coming to the last slide of my presentation. And I just want to pause here because so far I have spoken more on the facts and how the PAT program was conceived and what has been its impact close to 8 or 9 years after its inception. And I want to put this into the context of thinking fast and thinking slow paradigm, which has been popularized by Daniel Kahneman. And in general, I believe most of us would say that when it comes to policy making, the thinking slow paradigm works better. And so in that context, I want to just reflect on that what has been the learnings and some of the observations from this very interesting PAT program, very creative, very innovative, and which is continuously tweaked by Bureau of Energy Efficiency as well, and which has been in operation for close to 8-9 years now. So I'm going to touch upon some of the themes here. So expanding PAT to other sectors and new designated consumers. There are a large number of medium category enterprises. If we look at the small and medium enterprises, India being a very, very large country, and it has been said that SME sector contributes to almost like 40 to 45% of India's GDP. And these are all in the non-PAT sectors, which have sufficiently high energy demand, and also they are relatively inefficient. So, but they do not come under the PAT ambit because of the high threshold limit that PAT sets usually. So there is a need to think of how to bring these medium enterprises under the ambit of the PAT program for an overall industrial sector, and which will lead to energy efficiency improvements. Second point that I want to talk about is we should reassess the penalties. The penalty for the non-compliance under the PAT scheme is just rupees 1 million, and which will come to about $14,000 US. This penalty is much smaller as compared to the cost of compliance with the PAT program. And we believe that to encourage the adoption of energy efficient technologies and to reward the consumers who have met their targets, AEEE believes that the penalty should be much higher. Then we also feel that there should be stringent targets. At the end of the PAT cycle, there was an excess of energy saving certificates, as most of the designated consumers were able to meet their specific energy consumption targets. And this led to an oversupply of energy saving certificates and almost 15x difference between what is the demand and what was the supply. And the fact that I think this is being overachieved means that I think his stringency can be enhanced and the targets can be raised. Then in terms of enforcement and transparency, there is very little information that is available in the public domain about the energy saving certificates trading for the subsequent PAT cycle 2 and 3, which had been there for PAT cycle 1. And I believe that non-availability of this kind of data, where energy saving certificates are touted as I think one of the main benefits, makes it difficult to assess the performance of the program. And additionally, it has been reported that DCs who have failed to meet their targets did not buy the necessary energy saving certificates in time, which means that designated consumers that met their targets were not able to take advantage of the overachievement. So it is important for the program to ensure proper enforcement and transparency during the complete cycle. And then finally, the price management. Under the PAT cycle 1, the prices for the energy saving certificates significantly dropped, and this impacted most of the consumers who had overachieved their targets. And this is linked to, I think, the stringency of the targets, in my opinion, and they were not subsequently able to get a reasonable price of their energy savings for their energy saving certificate. Therefore, there is a need to implement a better price management strategy to ensure the integrity of the PAT program by enhancing the stringency and the targets for the energy efficiency within the industrial sector. Next slide. So I want to thank all of you for your time and attention. I also want to acknowledge that most of the information, except in the last slide, was compiled from information available in public domain, primarily from Bureau of Energy Efficiency website and the many PAT reports available in the public domain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. Very insightful information about a very complex program. We've got a question from an audience member. They'd just like to ask you a couple of questions around, or ask for your insights around setting the baseline and targets. What are the main challenges around that?
As I mentioned that there is a technical committee that constitutes of industry experts and of course policymakers and representatives from the private sector, which gets together, and that's a pretty involved and pretty data intensive exercise. And even while I think you're talking about energy management system, some companies are in a better position to share their data, which can make the job of, I think, setting the benchmarks a little easier. It's never very easy. There are further complexities in terms of the different grades of electricity or the processes that are used for cement production. And there are always a lot of, I think, the arguments and counter arguments in terms of how to set benchmarks which will address all these complexities that are likely to happen in a particular industrial segment. So yes, I think this is not a trivial exercise. There are a lot of, I think, reports that get published in terms of the methodology that the Bureau of Energy Efficiency uses in terms of setting this benchmarks or specific energy consumption. And then how do you go about verifying some of these claims of energy savings that different units are going to make. So I think once again, I think if there is a ISO 50001 unit, then the job of the accredited energy auditor becomes easier from a measurement and verification perspective. But if you have more of a simplified and a manual energy management system, then the task of, I think, these auditors, when they are conducting the measurement and verification is not an easy one. And I don't envy their jobs. So it's, as you rightly said, Patrick, and as I think the question is alluding to, this is a complex program, and it's difficult to, I think, satisfy or do a perfect job. But I still think that Bureau of Energy Efficiency is doing, I think, a remarkably good job. There are clearly, I think, areas where things can be improved, which I alluded to in my observations on the last slide.
You certainly did. Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. Just following on this question about, well, that was benchmarking and data that really underpin the whole system. At a practical level, so within organisations, I wanted to ask you both, Nathaniel and Dr. Kumar, what suggestions do you have for, I guess, policymakers to help encourage, to help businesses, to help incentivise better data quality gathering and use? Nathaniel, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patrick. Look, from our end, we're very fixated on not just energy management, but energy management to support the grid and support where we're heading in terms of renewables, and we think that we'll get there regardless of policy. But as the private industry is driving a lot of that. But in saying that, policy and policymakers are doing a lot in this space, and we're extremely supportive of the funding that's gone into supporting energy efficiency and energy management programs across the country. Things like education could certainly could help accelerate the adoption of these new models and new techniques. And with the release of the wholesale demand response mechanism, We feel that that will increase the awareness of demand-side participation and ultimately lead to a more sophisticated energy user that can start to really leverage their flexibility within their own operations. But when they start to get a bit more comfortable with this, really start to look at how batteries, storage, renewables all come together alongside their energy usage to leverage that across the energy market. And when they can start to bring all these different pieces together, not only will they start to drive savings and reduce their costs and emissions, but similarly, they'll have a positive impact on the grid and where we're heading as a nation. So we think education has a big piece, and just showing some of these proof cases and building upon that awareness will really help in this transition towards this energy management space.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nathaniel. And I mean, when we're talking about energy management systems, we're talking about a puzzle really with a number of different components. Data is absolutely at the heart of what's required, but also training, awareness, capacity, policy, leadership, all part of the importance of energy management systems. And
absolutely.
I think we're certainly going through a period of change, especially as with digitisation too. There are some great opportunities, both in gathering data, but also in the way in which it's used, so especially through automation. Dr. Kumar, I know a little bit about the energy efficiency journey in India. I think when people hear about the Perform Achieve trade scheme, they don't quite realise just how much you've been doing over the last decade or so. Can you give us some insight into some of the programs that have actually been happening before the Perform Achieve trade scheme?
Absolutely, Patrick. So I think clearly India is a large country, and I think I would say India's energy efficiency journey got kicked off in 2001 when Energy Conservation Act was formulated, and that led to the creation of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which is the main policy making and regulatory body that was given the specific mandate to promote, regulate, I think it developed information material. And I think I'm just looking at the time. So there are like maybe 3 or 4 areas that I just quickly want to touch upon. Some of the early work got kicked off through our energy audits. And Julianne mentioned, I think, the importance of simple energy audits and then leading to N16247. So India's journey started with energy audits, but as they gained more experience, they became a little bit bolder to start to think about an industry-wide program. And I think one of the things that we are working on and Indian government wants to address is how to bring energy efficiency in the small and medium enterprises, which is a very, very large segment, really outside the scope of the PAT program. But where there are significant inefficiencies and where some of the very basic techniques like audits, sub-metering, I think doing a manual energy management system will also make a difference. So that's in the industrial sector. There are a couple of programs that are pretty important. There is a pretty successful standards and labeling program in India. That is very, very important. And most recently, they have gotten a lot of traction because it's really interesting that it's the cooling that is really dominating the discussion in India. So the standards for fans, for room air conditioners, for refrigerators, I mean, these are the most important and critical standards that the Bureau of Energy Efficiency is working on. And the third and last thing that I would just like to mention are the building energy codes. So India has building energy codes, both for the residential sector, which is a relatively new one, developed 2 years ago. It's a much more fragmented sector. And then commercial building energy consumption, which has been there for almost like 13, 14 years now. And I think India has gained a lot of experience that it is using. So I'm going to stop here. But yes, I think the Bureau of Energy Efficiency is doing a phenomenal job. And a lot of recent work has focused on managing India's cooling demand in terms of how it is going to cool India in a warming planet. I think that is a pretty significant challenge that we are facing right now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar. And a couple of other things that I'm aware of is the focus on developing an energy audit service sector, great skills development over many years. So there's really been a great foundation that's then allowed you to do the Perform Achieve Trade Scheme. And congratulations to you and all involved in the scheme for the significant outcomes that have been achieved. We have come to the end of our session. As I said, we'd like to thank our speakers, all 4 speakers. You've really, it's been a great opportunity to tap into a global perspective and an Australian perspective from down in Melbourne. And thanks for your insights into energy management systems. I think for all of us, whatever we do, whatever work we do, whether we're policymakers, whether we're operating as energy managers in businesses, or whether we're consultants helping businesses to improve their energy efficiency, there's some really important takeaways that we can leave from this session and perhaps build on in our discussions with others in the rest of the conference. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. I just remind people to take a break. I probably don't need to remind you about that. But also take advantage of networking opportunities, the virtual exhibition, the meeting hub and the networking rooms, and let us know how you go with those. At 5:30, grab a drink if you like, and the Sundowner session will commence, and that's a conversation between Luke Menzel and the Honourable Mark Butler. And if you can, please make sure that you take the short survey at the end of this session to provide feedback about the session. And look, if you've got ideas for future online sessions, because in my view, we'll be always doing some of this as well as face-to-face in the future, because there's some great advantages to the online conference sessions as well. So please do share your thoughts, suggestions, and any feedback that you have. Thanks very much, folks. Please enjoy the rest of the conference.